Here she goes again. Hide your face, hide your neck, duck your head, wear an NFL football helmet when you are playing in a game versus DiJonai Carrington. Fresh off of clotheslining, a Kane and Undertaker clothesline from hell that she delivered to Sophie Cunningham, this girl is right back on the court, hitting people upside the head.
There's a moment in every sport where something shifts, where what looked like bad luck starts looking deliberate, where fans stop giving the benefit of the doubt and start asking harder questions. DiJonai Carrington just hit that moment, and the WNBA is watching it unfold in real time. 4 days after getting ejected for a flagrant 2, so severe that even her victim's retaliation was deemed justified by officials, she stepped back on the court and did it again. Not once, twice. In the same game, 2 different players, 2 separate face area contacts, and this time, nobody's buying the accident excuse anymore. What started as a conversation about one bad play has become something much bigger, a reckoning about patterns, safety, accountability, and whether the league's biggest rising talent is genuinely out of control or if something darker is happening beneath the surface. The evidence is piling up faster than the league can explain it away, and the story is no longer just about basketball. It's about what happens when talent meets conduct, and nobody's sure which one wins. To understand where we are right now, you have to rewind to one specific moment that changed everything.
And then she put both hands up right after. That's DiJonai.
Yeah, I gouged another white girl. Yeah, I gouged another white girl while wearing your Sophie Cunningham wig. I am officially. Hey, this ain't Clerks 2, but I'm taking back Sophie Cunningham's hair. I'm taking it back. You got Sophie Cunningham's hair on while you're poking the white girls in the eyeballs.
Sophie Cunningham was in the air, already committed to her layup on a fast break. The shot was pure. It was going in. And then DiJonai Carrington came from behind, not going for the ball, not trying to block anything, and swept her arm directly across Cunningham's head and neck in a motion that looked less like defense and more like something from a wrestling ring. Cunningham didn't just fall. She hit the deck hard enough that the impact was audible through the broadcast. For a second, everything stopped. The officials initially called it a flagrant 1. Standard stuff for WNBA basketball, physical play, aggressive defense, maybe a little over the line, but nothing that required ejection. Then they went to the replay, and everything changed. After review, they upgraded the call to a flagrant 2, the kind of foul that comes with an automatic ejection that gets defined in the rulebook with very specific language. Wind-up, impact, follow-through, those 3 words aren't random. In the WNBA's official rulebook, those are the exact terms used to describe contact that was neither accidental nor careless. They're describing something deliberate. Not necessarily malicious in intent, but deliberate enough that there's no way to explain it as a normal basketball play. What made that moment matter wasn't just what happened on the court, it was what happened after. Cunningham got up and immediately went after Carrington. Teammates from both sides had to physically pull them apart. When reporters asked the officiating crew why Cunningham didn't get a technical foul for her response, the answer was revealing. The ref said her reaction was acceptable given the severity of the initial contact. Let that sink in. The league, on record, said the response to Carrington's foul was justified because of how bad the foul actually was. That's not a neutral statement.
5 when it comes to DiJonai Carrington. Here she is on the floor being dirty once again. The girl cannot help herself at this point. She can't help it. Take a look at this. Okay, you swing at the ball, but then you hit her all in the face with your other hand, and then you put your hands up like you didn't do nothing. You hitting her all in the face. Look at this. Watch her left hand. The right hand right here went to the ball. Watch this left hand. Like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing, man? What are you doing? When is enough with this chick? Come on. Come on. You hitting people in the face. It's over and over and over. How many times do we have to witness?
That's the officials quietly confirming what everybody watching already knew. This wasn't a gray area play. This was serious. But here's where the story took a turn that nobody saw coming. Within minutes of getting ejected, while still in uniform, Carrington posted on social media. The message was simple but explosive: white privilege. That's it. 2 words. Immediately, the entire narrative shifted. What had been a straightforward conversation about a dangerous foul became something else entirely. Suddenly, people were debating whether the ejection was racially motivated, whether the league was treating players differently, whether Cunningham's retaliation was only excused because of who she was. The basketball question, was that foul too dangerous, got buried under an entirely different controversy. That tweet did something really interesting. It gave Carrington an escape hatch from the actual accountability moment. Instead of having to answer questions about her play on the court, she'd redirected the conversation into something bigger, something about race and officiating and systemic bias. Whether that was intentional or not doesn't matter. The effect was the same. The flagrant 2 stayed on the record, the ejection happened, but the deeper conversation about what she actually did on the court got complicated by everything else that came after it.
They go on to defend her, the story, the narrative that she's not a dirty player. She makes plays like this all the time. I put together a little clip of Djonai Carrington, who is definitely one of the dirtiest players in the WNBA. I don't know if we can roll it, but she's taken her long fingernails. She's scratched Caitlin Clark's eyes out. She's had multiple instances of chasing people down from behind, trying the same swat and smashing them in the head and causing mini fights. She pulled another girl's hair. I don't know if we'll get to that clip in a second when she's falling. Totally dirty play. This is not a skin color thing. She has a history of making dirty plays, and it's fine. The NBA, you can be
When reporters asked her about the tweet, whether it was connected to the foul and the ejection, her response was to deny any connection. She said people were reading too much into it, that she wasn't referring to the play, that the timing was just coincidence. But think about the actual timeline here. She gets ejected from a basketball game. Within what appears to be minutes, maybe even seconds, she posts about white privilege while tagging the Indiana Fever. The speed of it, the specificity of the timing, made the denial harder to believe. If it wasn't about the ejection, the question became, what was it about? And why post it right then? What made this moment so pivotal wasn't just the physical foul itself. It was that the tweet gave the story legs that went way beyond a single bad play. It turned a basketball incident into a cultural moment. It got people who don't follow the WNBA closely paying attention. It generated think pieces and debates on social media. It made Carrington's name trend. And in doing all that, it also made it impossible for the league to simply issue a suspension and move on, because there was now a race and officiating component baked into the entire narrative. 4 days later, when she stepped back on the court against the Golden State Valkyries, none of this context had been resolved. There was no conversation with the league about conduct or expectations. There was no meeting with her team about how to handle the attention. She just came back and played. And that's when things got worse in a way that nobody expected. Because what happened in that next game would prove that the Cunningham incident wasn't an outlier. It was the beginning of something much bigger. A pattern was about to emerge that would make that first foul look like a warning sign nobody took seriously enough. Imagine you're DiJonai Carrington's teammate, or maybe her coach, in the moments before tip-off against Golden State. You know what just happened. You know the league upgraded the foul to a flagrant 2. You know she got ejected. You know there's a social media controversy swirling. You're probably thinking, okay, she's going to be careful tonight. She understands the spotlight. She understands the scrutiny. She's going to dial it back and let things settle down. She'll have a clean game, show some restraint, prove that the last incident was an outlier. Then the game starts, and by the end of the night, you're staring at 2 more separate incidents, both involving hand contact to players' faces, both happening in the same game 4 days after the first one, and you're realizing this isn't about a bad day. This is about something else entirely. The first incident happened early in the game. Carrington was guarding Cecilia Zandalicini on the perimeter. Zandalicini had the ball, standard defensive position. Carrington's right hand went up, and that's legitimate. That's a basketball move. You go for steals, you contest shots, you use your hands, but her left hand didn't stop. It swept up in a cross and it landed square in Zandalicini's eye. Both of Carrington's arms were raised, both hands were up, and one of them found a face instead of the basketball. Watch the replay and you see the right hand going for the ball, but the left hand is doing something different. It's not trying to contest. It's not reaching for the ball. It's going somewhere else entirely. The contact was enough that you could see Zandalicini react. She felt it. It wasn't incidental. It wasn't accidental contact that happens sometimes in basketball. It was deliberate enough that she knew exactly what happened and exactly where it landed. And here's the thing, it didn't even get called a flagrant. It barely got called at all. The refs gave her a regular foul and the game moved on, but that's not where the night ends for Carrington. Later in the same game, Tiffany Hayes goes up for a layup. She's committed to her shot. She's in the air, and Carrington jumps with her. Here's the problem. Instead of getting anywhere near the basketball, instead of even attempting to block the shot, Carrington threw her arm down and caught Hayes directly across the mouth. This wasn't a basketball play. The ball wasn't near either of their hands. It was arm-to-face contact in a live game situation, and it happened so clearly that even casual viewers could see it wasn't a coincidence. That foul didn't get called as a flagrant either. It was just a regular foul. And that's what makes it even worse. Because if you're the WNBA front office, if you're trying to maintain any credibility about player safety, how do you watch someone poke one player in the eye, then throw her arm down on another player's face, in the same game, 4 days after an ejection for a dangerous foul, and not upgrade those to flagrants? How do you let both of those slip by without escalating the consequence? But wait, there's more context that matters here. Before either of those two incidents happened, Carrington had already picked up a technical foul. She was arguing with the referee in the third quarter. So think about the timeline. She's been in the game for a while. She's frustrated enough to argue with the officials and earn a technical. She's already heated. She's already emotional. And then, in that state of mind, she makes contact with Zandalicini's eye. And then, later, she catches Hayes across the mouth. That technical foul is actually really important because it tells you what mood she was in before either of those incidents happened. She wasn't cool and collected. She wasn't playing a controlled game. She was already frustrated, already arguing, already pushing back against the refs. And then 2 more physical incidents happened. When fans watched this unfold, they didn't need replays or slow-motion analysis to understand what they were seeing. They saw a player who was emotionally elevated, who had been through a controversially ejected the game before, who stepped back on the court and immediately put herself in situations where her hands ended up in places they had no business being. The most frustrating part for people watching, she did the thing after the second incident. You know the move. Both hands went up. The universal gesture for "I didn't do anything." The "I'm innocent" motion, except everyone watching had just seen her do it. Twice, to 2 different players, in the same game. And the gesture, that moment of denying what just happened, might have been worse than the actual contact. Because it suggested she knew exactly what she was doing and was testing whether she could get away with it. Here's what makes this situation so much more serious than a rookie making mistakes. DiJonai Carrington is not new to this league. She's not learning the speed of the game or adjusting to professional-level athleticism. She's a 6-year veteran. She was drafted by Connecticut in 2021. She's been through 3 different franchises already. She's got seasons of experience under her belt. She's been around coaching staffs, veteran players, training sessions, film reviews. She knows the rules. She knows what's expected. She's had years to learn how to play aggressive defense without crossing into dangerous contact. And yet here we are. The reason this matters is because it separates intent from pattern. When a rookie does something questionable, you can say, okay, they're still learning. When a 6-year veteran does it repeatedly, you can't use that excuse. You have to ask different questions. Not, are they learning, but do they know and don't care? Or is this intentional? Or is there something about how they play that they're not willing to change? And this isn't even Carrington's first eye poke incident. This goes back further than the Sophie Cunningham clothesline. The most famous one happened during the 2024 playoffs when she poked Caitlin Clark in the eye. That incident generated huge discussion at the time. People were upset, but Carrington and Clark both addressed it afterward. Clark herself said it wasn't done on purpose. Carrington said she couldn't even comprehend hitting someone in the eye on purpose. And because both players basically said it was accidental, people gave her the benefit of the doubt. Fine, that's reasonable. One incident. Accidents happen in basketball. But now you're not looking at one incident. You're looking at multiple incidents across different seasons, different teams, different opponents. Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, Cecilia Zandalicini, Tiffany Hayes. That's 4 different players, multiple years, multiple teams, and a pattern that becomes harder to explain away every time it happens. Once is an accident. Twice is a coincidence. 3 times starts to look like something else. 4 times, and the accident excuse doesn't hold water anymore. What's particularly frustrating for people who respect Carrington's actual basketball ability is that she's genuinely talented. This isn't about a mediocre player who's just dirty. She was a finalist for Most Improved Player. Her steal numbers put her near the top of the league defensively. She has the length, the instincts, the anticipation to guard multiple positions. She can legitimately change a game on the defensive end. That's why teams keep giving her chances despite everything else. Nobody is disputing her skill. The argument isn't that she can't play basketball. The argument is that skill alone doesn't get you a free pass to play dangerously. And that's where the frustration really comes from. Because if she was just a dirty player with no talent, the league would probably move on from her already. She'd be out. But because she's actually good at basketball, because she can legitimately help a team win games, there's this constant tension between her value on the court and her liabilities off it. Teams want what she brings athletically, but they're not sure if they want to deal with the rest of it. Here's something else that matters. Look at where she's been. Connecticut drafted her. They traded her away to Dallas in February 2024. Dallas didn't work out. She got moved to Minnesota at the trade deadline. Minnesota had her during the playoffs. She suffered a season-ending injury, and when it came time to commit to her long-term, they didn't. Now she's in Chicago on a 1-year deal. That's 4 organizations in roughly 2 years. Every single move came with some version of a team deciding it was time to move on. Now, sometimes players get moved for basketball reasons. Sometimes it's about fit. Sometimes it's about a rebuild. Sometimes it's just business. But when the pattern includes multiple head coaches essentially declining to bring her back, and when the most recent team only gave her a 1-year deal instead of anything longer, that's not coincidence. That's front offices and coaching staff quietly signaling something specific. They're saying, "We like what you bring athletically, but we're not confident enough in the rest of the package to commit long-term." A 1-year deal in this league, especially for a player with her experience and talent, isn't a vote of confidence. It's a trial run. It's the team keeping their options open. Think about what that actually means. Even before these recent incidents, even before the Cunningham clothesline, even before the Golden State game, teams were already hedging their bets on her. They were already deciding that her talent wasn't quite enough to overcome whatever concerns they had. And that was before the recent controversy. Now that these incidents are piling up, now that the pattern is getting impossible to ignore, her 1-year deal in Chicago might be looking more and more like a final opportunity rather than a fresh start. Because if this continues, the math gets really simple for front offices. Talent can't offset constant headaches forever. What happened after the Sophie Cunningham ejection was a masterclass in narrative control, whether intentional or not. Carrington posted "white privilege" from the locker room, and in that moment, the entire story shifted. The question that should have been central to the conversation, was that foul dangerous and does she have a pattern of dangerous fouls, got buried under something much bigger and much messier. This is actually genius from a certain perspective, even if it wasn't calculated. Because now, instead of just talking about a dangerous play, people are talking about race, about whether the league treats players differently, about systemic bias, about what white privilege even means in the context of professional basketball. The conversation became about everything except the actual basketball. And that gave Carrington an out. She never had to really defend the play itself because the discussion moved somewhere else entirely. When reporters asked her about the tweet, she basically said it wasn't about the foul. She said people were reading too much into it. She said the timing was just coincidence. She said we were stupid for inferring a connection, but think about the actual mechanics of that moment. She gets ejected from a basketball game. She's in the locker room. She has her phone. Within what appears to be seconds, maybe a minute at most, she posts 2 words with a specific player tag. The speed of it, the specificity, the fact that she did it immediately rather than hours later when cooler heads might prevail, suggested this wasn't random. This was reactive. This was emotional. This was her immediate response to being ejected. And here's where it gets interesting from a league perspective. That tweet did exactly what it needed to do from a self-preservation standpoint. It turned the story into a referendum on the league, on the refs, on whether players were being treated fairly. It made the conversation about systemic bias. And in doing that, it made it almost impossible for anyone to simply focus on the play without also addressing all these other questions. You can't talk about the flagrant 2 without also discussing whether the upgrade was fair. You can't talk about the ejection without also discussing whether she was being targeted. The league, for its part, stayed mostly quiet about the tweet. There was no official comment. There was no statement saying that players shouldn't try to reframe disciplinary decisions as racial issues. There was no pushback. And that silence meant the narrative Carrington set with those 2 words was the one that stuck. From that moment forward, the story wasn't just about her conduct. It was about the league's conduct. It was about fairness. It was about whether the WNBA was treating all players equally. What's really important here is understanding what that tweet accomplished, because it's the reason the Cunningham incident didn't result in a longer suspension. It's the reason the conversation moved sideways instead of forward. And it's why when the Golden State incidents happened 4 days later, there was no broader context about escalating behavior or serious conduct concerns. The tweet basically reset the narrative. It made the original foul secondary to the bigger social question. But here's the problem with that strategy, especially in hindsight. It only works once. The first time you redirect the conversation, it works. People engage, people debate. The story becomes more complex. But the second time something similar happens, people start connecting the dots. They start seeing the pattern not just on the court, but in the response to it. They start asking whether the social media post was a calculated way to avoid accountability, whether it's part of a larger pattern of not taking responsibility for what happens on the court. And that's exactly what happened. When the Golden State incidents occurred, fans didn't just focus on the fouls themselves. They started talking about how Carrington handled adversity. They started talking about accountability. They started asking whether she had learned anything from the Cunningham situation. And the answers they came up with weren't favorable. Because 4 days after that foul, after that ejection, after that controversial tweet, she was back doing the same thing. From a professional standpoint, what that tweet also did was paint Carrington into a corner. Because now she can't simply say, "I messed up, I'm going to be better," without also appearing to be backing down from her claim about white privilege. If the foul and ejection were unfair, if they were racially motivated, then she's stuck defending that position. But if she admits the foul was bad and she needs to change, then what was the tweet about? The narrative she created with those 2 words became a trap she couldn't escape from, because she couldn't simultaneously say, "The ejection was unfair," and "I'll improve my conduct," without looking like she was abandoning the position she'd staked out. And that's why the Golden State game became such a turning point. Because now, not only was there the physical conduct to worry about, there was the question of whether Carrington was learning anything, whether she was taking responsibility, whether she was willing to change. The tweet had made that part of the story, and the new incidents made it impossible to ignore. The narrative had shifted from, "Was this one foul bad?" to, "Does this player have a pattern and is she willing to address it?" And those are 2 very different questions, with very different implications for her career. Let's zoom out for a second and talk about the bigger picture here, because this story isn't just about one player's conduct. It's about the WNBA's credibility and where the league is positioned right now. The WNBA has spent the last couple of seasons riding an enormous wave of attention. The rookie class brought fresh energy. The broadcast deals got bigger. Sponsorship money increased. Teams got more investment. The league was positioned as clean, competitive, professional, and safe. That narrative mattered because the WNBA was trying to establish itself as a serious professional sport worth watching, worth investing in, worth spending advertising dollars on. And for a while, that wave was working. Attendance was up. Viewership was growing. The league felt like it was turning a corner. But every time a moment like the Carrington situation goes viral for the wrong reasons, whether it's a dangerous foul, a controversial locker room post, or rumors about phone use tied to gambling policy, it undermines that narrative. Because sponsors and broadcasters and potential investors are watching these moments. They're seeing how the league handles them. They're asking whether the WNBA is actually the professional, well-run league they're being sold, or whether there are deeper issues with conduct, accountability, and governance. From a business standpoint, Carrington's situation is complicated because she plays for Chicago. And Chicago, as an organization, now has to manage this. Every time she plays, every time she's in the news for the right or wrong reasons, she's reflecting on that franchise. If she's generating headlines for defensive excellence, that's great. But if she's generating headlines for hitting people in the face and creating social media drama, that's a problem that belongs to the Bulls organization now. At some point, and this is the uncomfortable conversation the Chicago front office is probably having in private, the team has to weigh whether the on-court production is worth the off-court noise. She's talented. She can help you win games, but she's also a magnet for controversy. She's also a conduct risk. She's also the kind of player who becomes the story instead of part of the story. And for a league trying to build credibility, that's expensive. Consider the sponsorship angle. If you're a brand thinking about investing in the WNBA, you're watching these moments. You're watching how the league responds. You're watching the social media reaction. And you're asking yourself, is this the environment I want my brand associated with? If the answer starts becoming no, then you start pulling back. You start considering other sports. You start asking whether WNBA audiences are actually worth it. And suddenly, the wave the league has been riding starts to lose momentum. The league also has to think about the referee situation. The officials who made calls in these games are now part of the story. They're being criticized for not upgrading the Zandalicini and Hayes fouls to flagrants. They're being questioned about consistency. And if there's one thing that kills credibility in professional sports, it's the perception that officiating is inconsistent or that the league is protecting certain players. Every time a foul gets missed or called differently, it feeds into that narrative. There's also the broader conversation about player safety that the WNBA has supposedly committed to. Zero tolerance. Player protection. Creating an environment where athletes can compete without fear of injury from dangerous contact. Those are real commitments the league has made. And now, with Carrington potentially violating that commitment repeatedly, the league is in a position where either it enforces its own standards or it admits that those standards only apply selectively. Either option is bad for credibility. What's particularly interesting is the contrast between how the league has handled other controversies and how it's handling this one. When there was the promotional video involving players joking about betting, the league walked it back immediately. It was quick to respond, quick to say, that doesn't represent us, quick to adjust course. But with Carrington, the league has been relatively quiet. The Cunningham ejection happened. The tweet happened. The Golden State incidents happened. And the league's official response has been minimal. The silence is notable, and fans have picked up on it. They're asking, why is the league so sensitive about gambling jokes but relatively quiet about repeated dangerous fouls? That inconsistency is what's really eroding confidence. Because if the WNBA is going to have rules, if it's going to have standards, if it's going to have a zero-tolerance policy on dangerous contact, then it needs to actually enforce those things consistently. When it doesn't, when it appears to ignore or minimize some violations while cracking down on others, the entire system loses credibility. And credibility, especially for a league trying to build its brand and attract investment, is everything. For Chicago specifically, the calculus gets even more complicated when you factor in that one-year deal. She's not locked in long-term. She's on a trial basis. Which means if she continues to be a distraction, if she continues to generate negative headlines, if she continues to be a conduct risk, the organization can make a change relatively cleanly after this season. But that doesn't help the business situation now, because now they have to manage a potentially volatile situation for the entire year. They have to deal with whatever happens on the court, whatever happens on social media, whatever the narrative becomes. And all of that reflects on the franchise. Let's talk about what the pattern actually looks like when you step back and look at it holistically. Because this isn't random. This isn't one player having a couple of bad weeks. This is a documented history spanning years, multiple teams, multiple opponents, and a consistent theme. Start with Caitlin Clark in the 2024 playoffs. Eye poke. Both players said it wasn't intentional. The basketball world moved on, but that incident stayed in people's memories. It became a reference point. Then, months later, Sophie Cunningham gets clotheslined in a way so severe that the league itself called it deliberate, not accidental. That's a different level. That's the league using language that specifically describes intentional contact. Then, 4 days later, we get Cecilia Zandalicini and Tiffany Hayes, both face area contact in the same game. That's not a coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. And patterns get names in professional sports. The nickname Eye Poker has been following Carrington since the Clark incident, but it was more of a joke at the time. Now it's being said with a lot less patience and a lot more edge. Because now it's not one isolated incident from over a year ago. It's 3 separate players, 3 separate faces, all within the span of a single week. The math is really simple. One incident is an accident. Multiple incidents are a pattern. And here's what makes the pattern so damaging. Every time it happens, the explanation offered is some version of it wasn't intentional. She goes for the ball. Her hand just happens to make contact with a face. It's unfortunate. It's a basketball play that got physical. It's not deliberate. But the replays tell a slightly different story. Watch the Cunningham play, and you see someone specifically targeting the head area in a way that has nothing to do with defending the ball. Watch the Zandalicini play, and you see a hand specifically going to the face, while the other hand goes for the ball. A two-handed approach, where one hand is clearly not trying to get the basketball. Watch the Hayes play, and there's no ball anywhere near the action. There's just arm-to-face contact in a situation that has nothing to do with defending the shot. At some point, intent stops being the only question worth asking. Pattern becomes its own kind of evidence. It's not about whether she's sitting in her locker room consciously deciding, today I'm going to poke people in the face. It's about whether her approach to defense, her aggression level, her willingness to play right at the edge of the rules and potentially past them, has become a consistent feature of how she plays. And the answer to that question, based on the available evidence, is yes. The fairness question here matters too, because it's not abstract. These aren't imaginary opponents getting hit. These are real players with real careers. Cecilia Zandalicini got poked in the eye. She had to play the rest of that game and the rest of the season wondering if she needed a spotter every time Carrington switched onto her. Tiffany Hayes took contact to the face in a play where the ball wasn't even close to either player's hands. She had to deal with the physical impact and the frustration of that contact not being escalated to a flagrant. Sophie Cunningham left the floor looking shaken, needing her teammates to physically step in to keep the situation from boiling over. These aren't statistics. These are real players absorbing real contact night after night because they're playing against someone who has built a reputation for playing right up against the edge of the rulebook, and according to a lot of people watching, well past it. And that affects their safety. It affects their confidence. It affects their ability to play their game without worrying about whether they're going to get hurt. What's particularly frustrating is that Carrington is actually talented enough that she doesn't need to play this way. She doesn't need the aggressive contact. She doesn't need to be swiping at faces. She can get steals without it. She can play great defense without it. The athleticism and instincts are there. So the question becomes, why does she keep doing it? Is it a choice? Is it a lack of control? Is it something in her competitive makeup that makes her play at that level regardless of the consequences? For the WNBA, this pattern represents a test case for whether the league's rules actually mean anything. Zero tolerance on dangerous contact. Does that apply to everyone equally, or only when the internet forces the league's hand? Flagrant fouls for contact to the face and head, are those being called consistently? Are they being upgraded when the same player repeatedly does the same thing? The pattern also tells you something about how Carrington responds to adversity and consequences. After the Cunningham ejection, she didn't take a step back. She didn't seem to recalibrate or be more careful. If anything, the next game she went right back to the same aggressive, physical approach. which suggests that either she doesn't see the issue, or she doesn't care, or she thinks she can get away with it. None of those options are good. And all of them suggest that the pattern isn't going to fix itself without external intervention. Just when the story seemed complicated enough, another controversy started circulating online, and this one has potentially serious legal and regulatory implications. In the aftermath of the ejection against Cunningham, clips and claims started spreading that Carrington was on her phone while still in uniform during the game. Something that would be a real problem given how strict the WNBA's current policies are around device use and gambling. Let's talk about why this matters, because it's not just gossip. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement explicitly prohibits players from wagering directly or indirectly on any aspect of a WNBA game. That's a serious rule. It's there to protect the integrity of the sport. And the league has been extremely sensitive about anything phone or gambling related this season, especially after having to walk back a promotional video involving players joking about betting just weeks before these Carrington incidents. When the league had to distance itself from that video, it sent a clear message. We take gambling policy seriously, and we're not joking around about it. So now, if there's any truth to the claims that Carrington was on her phone during the game, that becomes a problem that goes way beyond bad defensive fouls. That becomes a conduct violation that could have real consequences. Not just fines or suspensions, but potentially serious disciplinary action if it's determined she was using the phone in violation of league policy. What's interesting is that after these rumors started spreading, some people actually went to the WNBA rulebook trying to find the specific regulation prohibiting phone use. It's a 91-page document, and people were searching through keywords, looking for the exact language. And here's where it gets murky, because the specific rule isn't as clearly spelled out as you might think. But that doesn't matter, because the broader principle is there in the CBA. Players aren't supposed to be on electronic devices in ways that violate league policy. And the league has been very clear that it takes this stuff seriously. The silence from the league office on this specific claim is actually telling. Because you'd think if there was a way to definitively say, we looked into this and there's nothing to it, the league would want to get ahead of that narrative. But the league hasn't issued an official statement. It hasn't investigated publicly. It hasn't cleared it up. And that silence, in itself, becomes part of the story. Because a league that talks tough about gambling policy in one breath and stays quiet about a player's potential phone use in the next isn't being consistent. And fans have picked up on that inconsistency immediately. What matters here isn't necessarily whether she was actually on her phone, though that would be serious if true. What matters is that the narrative around Carrington is now expanding beyond just the physical fouls. It's now including questions about her judgment, her decision-making, her understanding of league rules, her willingness to abide by regulations that everyone else is expected to follow. Each new element that gets added to the story makes the overall picture worse. It's not just about dangerous fouls anymore. It's about dangerous fouls plus controversial social media posts, plus alleged phone use during a game, plus a pattern of not responding well to consequences. From a league perspective, the phone use rumors represent something the WNBA really can't afford to ignore, because gambling integrity is one of the areas where professional sports are most sensitive. The NBA has had major scandals around this. The league has permanent rules and serious consequences for gambling violations. So when rumors start circulating that a WNBA player might have violated gambling policy, that's the kind of thing that needs to be addressed clearly and publicly, not left to speculation and social media theories. The fact that it hasn't been addressed clearly suggests either that the league is aware of it and investigating quietly, or that the league is aware of it and choosing not to engage, or that the league isn't sure what to do about rumors that may not have any factual basis. All of those possibilities are problematic in different ways. If the league is investigating, they should say so. If they're choosing not to engage, they should explain why gambling policy doesn't apply to this situation. If they're not sure, they should figure it out. And this is where the broader narrative around Carrington becomes even more damaging, because now it's not just the basketball question. It's the conduct question. It's the judgment question. It's the question of whether she's someone you can trust to follow league rules and regulations. It's the question of whether her competitive drive is pushing her into places where she's willing to bend rules in multiple areas, not just on the court. That's the kind of story that affects a player's marketability, her endorsement potential, her relationship with sponsors and broadcasters. It's the kind of story that makes front offices nervous because it suggests character and judgment issues that go beyond just playing physical defense. So here's where we are. A 6-year veteran with documented incidents spanning multiple seasons, multiple teams, and multiple opponents. A foul so severe the league called it deliberate and ejected her for it. A controversial social media post that shifted the narrative away from the basketball question. A game 4 days later where she got 2 more face area contact incidents. A pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore. Rumors about phone use that haven't been addressed or cleared up. And a 1-year contract with Chicago that's looking more like a final opportunity than a fresh start. The question now becomes, what happens next? Because if the incidents stop, if Carrington somehow recalibrates and stays clean from here on out, the story becomes historical. It becomes, remember when she had that stretch of incidents. But if they continue, if the pattern persists, then the league has to make a choice about how seriously it takes its own rules. From a player conduct perspective, there are options available. Suspensions, fines, mandatory counseling or coaching interventions, making it clear that the pattern has been documented and further incidents will result in escalating consequences. The league could be proactive about this instead of reactive, but so far, that hasn't happened. The Cunningham ejection was automatic based on the flagrant 2. The Zandalicini and Hayes fouls weren't even upgraded to flagrants. And the phone use rumors haven't been addressed. There's been no coordinated league response. No clear message about expectations going forward. For Chicago, the decision calculus is actually pretty simple. She's on a 1-year deal. If this behavior continues, if she continues to generate negative headlines, if the controversy keeps building, the team can make a move after this season without tying up cap space or dealing with long-term complications. But that also means the team probably needs to address this internally right now. There should be a conversation. There should be expectations set. There should be consequences outlined. Because if the league isn't going to manage it, the franchise needs to. For Carrington herself, she's at a crossroads. Her career trajectory was already being questioned before these incidents. 4 organizations in 2 years. Multiple coaches deciding to move on. A 1-year deal instead of something longer. She had a chance to reset after the Cunningham incident. She had a chance to prove the critics wrong. And instead, she went right back to the same pattern in the next game. That's a choice, whether she acknowledges it as one or not. And that choice is determining how the rest of her career is going to look. The narrative around her has shifted completely. She's no longer primarily known for her defensive instincts or her athleticism. She's known for the eye poke nickname. She's known for the pattern. She's known for the controversy. That's what defines her in public perception right now. And image problems in professional sports turn into real problems really fast. Sponsors don't want to be associated with it. Teams don't want the distraction. Fans don't want to root for it. So the timeline is getting shorter for her to make a change. What's also important to understand is that this isn't about one game, one incident, or one moment of bad luck. This is about a series of choices and patterns that have added up. Some of those are on-court choices, how aggressively to defend, where to place her hands, how far to push the rules. Some of them are off-court choices, what to post on social media, how to respond to consequences, whether to use an ejection as an opportunity to learn or an opportunity to deflect. Every choice has contributed to the position she's in now. For the WNBA, this is a test case. The league has been talking about safety, about protecting players, about having zero tolerance for dangerous contact. Carrington's pattern either validates those commitments or exposes them as lip service. If the league takes serious action, if it investigates the phone use rumors, if it escalates penalties for repeat violations, if it makes clear that the pattern matters, then the commitment is real. But if nothing significant happens, if the story just becomes another controversy that the league weathers until the news cycle moves on, then everybody watching knows exactly how serious those commitments actually are. The honest answer is we don't know what happens next. We don't know if Carrington will come back clean and stay clean. We don't know if the WNBA will take action or stay quiet. We don't know if Chicago will handle this internally or let it continue. What we do know is that the pattern is documented, the incidents are on video, the conversation is happening, and the credibility of the league's rules and standards is being tested by all of it. What we also know is that at some point, pattern stops being speculation and becomes evidence. At some point, talent stops being enough. At some point, the league has to decide whether it actually believes what it's been saying about player safety and conduct standards. And at some point, a player has to decide whether they're willing to change or whether they're going to test how much they can get away with. Right now, all of those moments are still unfolding. And the basketball world is watching to see how they resolve. This story is far from over. DiJonai Carrington stands at a crossroads, a genuinely talented defender whose pattern of dangerous contact has overshadowed everything else about her game. The Cunningham clothesline wasn't an outlier. The Golden State incidents weren't a coincidence. They're part of a documented history, spanning years, and multiple opponents that the WNBA can no longer ignore if it wants any credibility around player safety. What makes this particularly urgent is the silence. No coordinated league response. No clear escalation of consequences for repeat violations. No official addressing of the phone use rumors that could touch on gambling policy. Just the basketball world watching, waiting, and drawing its own conclusions about what the league's actual standards are and whether they apply equally to everyone. The uncomfortable truth is this. At some point, one-time accidents become habits. Habits become who you are as a player. And once that reputation solidifies, even talent isn't enough to overcome it. Carrington still has time to change the narrative, but the window is closing, the pattern is documented, and the consequences, whether the league enforces them or not, are becoming real. The question isn't just what happens next on the court, it's what happens off it. It's whether she's willing to actually be different, or whether the next incident is already waiting to happen.